During a visit to the palace, Camilla's son's car trunk was opened, and what happened next shocked everyone at the palace. Camilla's relationship with her kids had always been close, but it was shaped by royal life. Tom Parker Bowles and his sister Laura Lopes had chosen to live their lives away from being royals, wanting their own jobs and families. They were never working royals, and Camilla was careful to keep that distance. But there's one surprising thing about their relationship that most people never knew. The more Camilla's job connected her to the royal family, the more people began to notice her children, and so did palace security. Guards were extra careful when Tom visited. He wasn't a royal, but because he was close to Camilla, he had some access, and that made everything about him, like his car's license plate, worth checking closely. For Camilla, it was a clear sign that even though she tried to keep her children out of the royal spotlight, she couldn't fully protect them from the attention that came with her new life. One morning, Camilla had woken up early, keeping to her usual routine. She liked being alone in the small living room looking at the newspapers, and often calling her children Tom and Laura. Those calls were short, rarely more than 10 minutes, but they kept her feeling normal. Despite her royal job, Camilla held tightly to being a mom and grandmother. That same morning, Tom had come to visit earlier than usual, and without calling first, Tom Parker Bowles is a well-known food critic and writer. He was never one for fancy ceremonies, but being the son of the Queen meant his visits often drew attention, whether he liked it or not. He'd arrived in a black car, parking near the private entrance. To him, it was just another family visit, a regular Friday stop to see his mom before heading to a book meeting later that afternoon. But the royal security rules treated every detail seriously, no matter how normal it seemed to him. Inside the house, Tom said hello to his mother with a warm smile. He sat in a chair across from her, talking with the relaxed voice of a son who was used to the difference between his private life and his mother's royal one. He talked excitedly about his new cookbook, sharing details about dishes he had recently tried out. Camilla listened closely, sometimes jumping in with a few questions. These talks were a nice break from the constant duties of royal life: meetings, official visits, and reports. By mid-morning, something unexpected happened. One of the guards, known as Sergeant Whitmore, noticed something strange about Tom's car. Unlike the car he usually drove, this one had no prior permission in the system. Guards were trained to remember such details, and Whitmore, who had worked there for more than 10 years, was especially good at noticing things. As he walked around the car, his attention focused on the trunk. It sagged ever so slightly, heavier than expected. That kind of weight wasn't unusual by itself. Whitmore quietly called another guard over on his radio. The two of them walked slowly around the car, careful not to attract attention. A slight feeling of worry spread among the courtyard staff, who began moving more slowly. Sensing something was happening inside, everything still felt relaxed. Tom was talking about a Paris chef he had met recently, laughing about the man's weird cooking style. Camilla leaned in, clearly enjoying the story. Neither of them knew what was going on just outside. Finally, Whitmore decided it was time to do a routine check. He knocked softly on the car window and pointed toward the trunk. The sound echoed through the courtyard and caught the attention of other palace workers. He bent toward Tom and spoke in a low voice. "Sir, the guard needs you by the car." Tom looked confused and frowned a little. "Is there a problem?" Camilla's face got tense. She was used to tight security, but her son being pulled into it was rare. "What on earth is this about?" she asked, her voice sharper than before. Tom got up and walked outside. Whitmore stood by the car, another guard beside him. "Is something wrong?" Tom asked, now sounding a bit annoyed. "Just a standard check, sir," Whitmore said calmly. "The trunk looks heavier than usual. We need to see what's inside." Tom sighed and rubbed his forehead. He didn't like this side of royal life. The doubt, the constant checks, the feeling of being treated more like a stranger than family. "Fine, go ahead," he said, his voice low and clearly frustrated. When the guard opened the trunk, everything suddenly felt different. Inside was a large metal box, sealed with a number lock. It looked heavy with scratches from travel. It was the kind of box people use to carry something very private. "What's this, sir?" Whitmore asked. His voice was calm, but firmer now. "It's personal. Just papers and books. Nothing dangerous." Whitmore didn't move. The rules said locked boxes had to be checked, no matter who they belonged to. "We'll need to take a look." Tom paused, clearly uncomfortable. I'd rather you didn't. These are private things. Very private. The discussion outside had gone on long enough to bring Camilla out of the house. She walked into the courtyard, looking both annoyed and worried. What's going on here? Whitmore gave a small bow. Your Majesty, there's a locked case in the car. For safety reasons, we need to check it. Camilla looked at her son, but by now the mood had changed. People who worked at the house began to notice that something unusual was going on outside. They couldn't hear what was being said, but they could clearly see the Queen's son standing next to guards who were looking at a locked box in his car. Just then, another car drove into the courtyard. Prince William stepped out. Prince William's presence changed everything because what happened next was completely unexpected. He had come to talk with Camilla about an upcoming event, but the scene made him stop. Guards his stepmother, her son Tom, a locked box being questioned. What's going on? William asked, walking over. The guards quickly told Prince William what was happening, explaining the unusual license plate, the oddly heavy trunk, and Tom's refusal to open the locked box. William listened carefully, saying nothing as he looked at each person. First the guards, then Tom, then Camilla. His face stayed blank. Without hesitating, he took control of the situation. The guards immediately stepped back, letting the future king take charge. Camilla's anger was clear. She didn't like William taking over where her son was involved, but William stayed focused. He turned his attention to Tom, giving him a firm order. Tom got stiff. His body language changed. He was tense, guarded, refusing to do what William said. He made it clear he thought the contents of the case were private and wasn't willing to hand it over easily. William, unmoved, made his position just as clear. As long as the box was on royal property, security rules came before personal privacy. If there was truly nothing to hide, then it had to be proven. The situation had gotten worse, and now all eyes were on Tom. William's order settled the matter. The guards stepped back, their eyes locked on him as he took the key from Whitmore's hand. The trunk creaked when the lock opened. And when the lid finally lifted, what lay inside made even the toughest staff standing nearby go silent. Inside were not knives or cooking tools, as Tom had claimed. Laid out neatly, wrapped in tissue paper, and held together with rubber bands, were stacks of handwritten pages. Beneath them, several leather-bound diaries, their edges worn, their covers creased from years of use. At the very bottom sat 2 sealed envelopes, both marked in Diana's easily recognized handwriting. The handwriting on the pages was instantly familiar. The bold curves, quick strokes, and slanted letters were unmistakable. William stopped cold. His eyes stayed on the words, and for a moment, he didn't breathe. These weren't just old letters or keepsakes. These were the kind of private things the royal family locked away in secure storage, never meant to be seen again. Tom stood nearby, clearly uncomfortable. He didn't say much, but it was enough to confirm what William had already realized. The handwriting belonged to Princess Diana, their mother. No one explained how her personal things had ended up in Tom's car. He didn't say they were his. He didn't try to explain where he got them from, and the fact that he stayed quiet made the situation even more serious. The guards standing around looked at each other, unsure what to do. Everyone now understood that this wasn't just about a strange box in a car. This was something bigger. These items had been hidden on purpose, and now they were sitting out in the open. William carefully picked up one of the diaries. The leather cover was worn with age. He held it gently, knowing his mother had once held it too. Her private thoughts were written inside. As he stood there, he felt the weight of it, not just in his hands, but in his heart. These weren't just family papers. They were pieces of his mother's life, memories and words that he thought were gone forever. And now they had shown up with his stepbrother. Tom wouldn't look at him. His eyes stayed on the ground. He didn't try to explain or defend himself. That silence, more than anything, bothered William. It meant Tom knew how serious this was. Maybe he even knew he was never supposed to have them. William's mind started to put the pieces together. These diaries didn't come from a thrift store or a forgotten attic. They came from somewhere close, from inside the royal circle. Someone with access must have taken them. Someone who had the power to remove such private items without being noticed. Someone who wanted to keep them hidden. William looked briefly at Camilla. She said nothing. Her face stayed calm, but her stillness gave something away. Everyone else looked shocked except her. and that made William's thoughts race even more. Of all the people there, she was the only one who didn't seem surprised. William closed the box slowly, pressing the lid down with care. The courtyard felt heavy with silence. What had just happened wasn't only shocking because of what they had found, but because of what it meant. If Princess Diana's private diaries and letters had somehow been taken from the royal storage, where they were supposed to be locked away safely, then what else might have been taken to? And why had these very personal items ended up with Tom? The guard stood still, waiting for instructions. William didn't hesitate. He gave a clear order. The box must be taken away immediately. No one allowed to touch it, and no more questions asked. Whitmore followed the order at once. He called 2 more guards to help move the trunk into William's car. Tom looked up. His face was tight with emotion, but he said nothing. He looked like he wanted to defend himself, but at the same time, he knew he couldn't. It was clear he felt caught, and he couldn't decide whether to argue or to admit guilt. When the trunk was placed in William's car and the door closed loudly, it felt like the end of a moment, but not the end of the problem. For William, this was just the beginning. This wasn't just about someone holding on to his mother's belongings. It felt like someone had stolen from her memory, and now those stolen things had ended up with Camilla's son. Later that day, back at Kensington Palace, William carried the trunk into a private room. He placed it inside a secure safe, then asked all his staff to leave. He wanted to be alone. Slowly, he opened the trunk and lifted the first stack of letters. What he found inside stopped him cold. They were written in his mother's own hand in 1995, a painful time in her life. The letters were raw and honest. In them, Diana wrote about being followed by strangers, her phone calls being listened to, and how she always felt like someone was trying to trap her. She spoke of how Prince Charles acted like he didn't care. She also wrote about Camilla, how her presence had always hung over Diana's marriage, making her feel pushed aside. Diana described lonely nights, crying behind locked doors where no one could see. Then William found a diary entry written just a few months before his mother's death. It was even more shocking. Diana talked about meetings she had that were never officially recorded. She mentioned people, some by name, some only hinted at, and shared her fears that her life might be in danger. At the bottom of one of her letters, Diana had scribbled a chilling sentence. "If anything happens to me, it will not be an accident." William sat back in his chair, stunned. The words hit him hard. These weren't just old papers. They were his mother's voice, telling her truth, her fear, and her pain. These weren't written for the public or historians. They were her personal cries for help, locked away, stolen, and kept from him until now. As night fell, Tom sat alone in his house, restless. The events of the day kept replaying in his mind. From his point of view, the confrontation outside Clarence's house had taken something from him, something he couldn't quite explain. Camilla, on the other hand, understood that the problem was now much bigger. Her son's careless actions had turned William's attention toward a part of the past she had hoped would remain hidden forever. If William decided to find out how those letters and diaries had gotten into Tom's hands, it would raise serious questions. How had those things left the royal storage? Who took them, and how did they end up with Tom Parker Bowles? William had already begun asking himself those questions. The idea that what he found might be just a small piece of a larger problem kept going around in his mind. He couldn't stop thinking that someone had stolen Diana's letters that were kept in the palace. The trunk hadn't just revealed old papers, it had opened the door to a truth that was too big to ignore. Someone inside the palace had taken something that should have never been touched. And now that it was found, William had unknowingly started something much bigger. A consequence that even Camilla, the queen, would not be able to avoid. William barely slept. The lamp on his desk burned until dawn, throwing light over the scattered letters and diaries in front of him. Every page made the weight in his chest heavier. By morning, the tiredness was clear on his face. He stepped away from the desk only when the first light broke across the palace grounds. He pressed the safe closed, locking the box away, then walked into his private sitting room, where assistants were already waiting. The news of what had happened the previous day had not yet reached the public. But inside the walls of Kensington, Clarence House, and Buckingham Palace, the whispers were already loud. The first consequence came quickly. Security rules required that an official report be written any time suspicious material was found on palace grounds. The guards who had flagged Tom's vehicle had already written notes, and those notes now sat in William's hands. What was once a private family business was now on record and likely to leak. But it didn't end there. At 8 a.m., William made his first decision. He called Sir Clive Alden, his father's main private secretary. A man who had served Charles for years and was considered one of the most experienced people in royal administration. William trusted him more than most. The conversation was short. The diaries and letters, William explained, had to be treated as stolen royal property. That meant rules had to be followed. Sir Clive asked only one question. "Do you want this handled quietly or by the book?" William hesitated, then replied, "Both quietly, but properly. If this looks like a cover-up, it will be worse than the theft itself." By mid-morning, a small crisis team was in place. Palace legal advisors were brought in, the same team that had handled the Sussex's departure in 2020, and the fallout over Prince Andrew's legal troubles. The lawyers spelled out the risks. First, having those documents and letters by anyone outside the storage could be considered theft under the Royal Collections Act. Second, the fact that they were in Tom Parker Bowles's car created a legal and political problem. He was not a working royal, but he was the Queen's son. Prosecuting him would mean dragging Camilla's family into public scandal. Sparing him would look like favoritism. Either way, the Crown's reputation would take a hit. By noon, William had called his father. Charles was at Highgrove that day, preparing for a scheduled event. The phone call lasted 20 minutes. Charles, tired from decades of family drama, listened carefully, but offered little instruction. In the end, he told his son, "Handle it firmly, but don't let it destroy us." That response left William with both freedom and burden. He now had to decide whether to treat the matter as a family issue or not. Meanwhile, Camilla was not sitting idle. At Clarence House, she spent the morning in intense conversation with her private secretary. Her face was pale, her hands restless. She knew exactly what was at stake. For years, she had endured the tabloid headlines, branding her the other woman. Becoming queen had been her slow comeback. But if those news surfaced, it could all collapse in a matter of days. Her first instinct was to protect Tom, according to palace insiders. She called Tom and told him not to speak to anyone or answer any questions. It was the harsh truth. If she was tied too directly to the discovery, if anyone even suspected the letters had passed through her hands, the scandal would not stop at her son. It would affect her. Back at Kensington, William's assistants debated the next steps. Some argued for police involvement. Others suggested the documents could be quietly taken into the royal storage at Windsor with no word spoken. But William rejected both extremes. He understood that doing nothing would make it look like the monarchy was hiding something. In recent years, secrecy has always backfired. The Andrew scandal, for instance, had gotten bigger because the palace's first instinct was silence. Later, William made his second decisive move. He ordered that Tom Parker Bowles be formally questioned, not by police, but by royal legal officers. This way, a record would exist, but without handing control to Scotland Yard or the press. The questioning took place that same afternoon in a private office at Clarence House. Tom admitted to having the trunk, but refused to explain how it came into his possession. His tone was defensive, even combative. "They've been hidden for long," he told the officers. "If you think I broke into some vault to get them, you're not correct. But I'm not saying anything more." The officers noted his words carefully. The lack of explanation only deepened suspicion. Within hours, the file was on William's desk. That evening, William faced his most difficult choice yet: whether to press the matter further and risk turning it into a criminal case, or to contain it within the family. He sat alone in his study again. Kate, entering briefly to check on him, she placed a hand on his shoulder and asked, "What will you do?" He replied quietly, "If I let this slide, I will weaken the crown. If I push, I destroy them. Either way, it stains us." The consequences were already spreading outward. Journalists who regularly followed the royal family had started to pick up bits of the story. One reporter from the Times called the palace press office late that night, asking if there had been an issue with private items at Clarence House. The press team, unprepared, gave their usual denial. But the fact that the question was being asked at all confirmed William's worry. The story wouldn't stay secret for long. In the days that followed, the royal household went into full crisis mode. lawyers started writing up possible public statements. Security was made tighter around Kensington Palace to stop any more leaks. Behind closed doors, royal staff argued about whether to quietly inform the Prime Minister in case the situation turned into a bigger problem for the country. For Camilla, the stress was too much. At a private dinner with King Charles 3 nights later, she finally broke down in frustration. There were now 3 risky paths ahead. First, William could keep the discovery hidden, but that would make it seem like he was part of another royal cover-up. Second, he could expose Tom, which might tear the family apart and cause a major scandal. Third, he could release only some of the documents, enough to show honesty, but not enough to satisfy everyone. That might protect the monarchy, but only just. Still, no one could be sure what would happen with any of these choices. There is growing pressure for Prince William to hand Tom over to the authorities, with many believing that only a formal investigation will reveal how the documents were obtained. What do you think Prince William should do? Share your opinions with us in the comment section. If you enjoyed the video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, click the following video on your screen and you will enjoy.